It's the kind of hour that feels detached from time itself. The city outside is asleep, wrapped in a blanket of cold rain and distant hums. Inside a small apartment, the only light comes from a flickering TV, static hissing like a slow exhale. The narrator sits in the dimness, voice low, calm, steady, as though afraid of waking something unseen. They begin with a question: have you ever felt reality? Stutter? A pause hangs in the air. A flicker in your memory. A place you swear you've been before. A moment that repeats when it shouldn't. Or maybe someone calling your name in an empty room. The tone isn't accusatory. It's intimate. A whisper shared with the listener across the silence. The rain thickens outside. The sound merges with the static, forming a strange white noise that seems to pulse with the rhythm of the narrator's voice. Most people call it déjà vu. Others call it fatigue, or a glitch in their own perception. But there are stories, real ones, where those glitches don't fade. They grow. The narrator's voice tightens, like the temperature in the room has dropped. They speak of strange events caught on camera, of people who remember things that never happened, of days that disappear and voices that belong to no one. Their tone carries a hypnotic pull, the kind that draws late-night listeners deeper, inviting them to relax even as unease builds in their chest. The camera, if this were film, would drift slowly through the apartment. Past walls lined with old photographs, books half open, a mug left unfinished. Everything feels normal, yet just slightly wrong. The photo frames seem off-level. The clock ticks irregularly. For a moment, it even appears to tick backwards. The narrator sighs softly. Sometimes the universe trips over itself, like a line of code repeating endlessly. And sometimes, when it happens, someone sees it. A story begins to take shape. A voice trembling on the edge of reason. These are the accounts of those who claim they've seen the fabric tear. Ordinary people, teachers, drivers, parents, loners, who swear they've glimpsed something that shouldn't exist. Something that broke through the ordinary world and stared back. The static hum intensifies. The TV flickers with ghost images. Highways dissolving into oceans. Crowds moving in reverse. Faces that never stop smiling. The light from the screen paints the narrator's face in shifting shadows. Half real, half reflection. Their eyes glint like someone who's seen too much. Some of these stories end quietly. Some don't end at all. A low note hums beneath the narration, almost imperceptible, like the sound of a heartbeat underwater. The atmosphere is suffocatingly still, the kind of silence that feels alive. What would you do, the narrator asks softly, if reality forgot you for a moment? If you looked in the mirror and saw a stranger blink a second before you did? The question lingers. The TV flashes briefly to black, and the rain stops. There's no sound, only the distant hum of electricity in the walls. If the universe has rules, then who writes them? And what happens when they make a mistake? The tone deepens into dread. The narrator's words start to slow, deliberate, each one landing heavy and resonant. Maybe the truth is simple. Maybe none of this is broken at all. Maybe this is the correction. There's a soft mechanical click, the kind that sounds like a tape recorder ending a loop. The light flickers once more. For an instant, the narrator's reflection appears on the black TV screen, but their lips aren't moving. You might not believe the things you're about to hear. The voice whispers, now slightly distorted, layered as though two versions are speaking at once. But maybe that's how it starts. One story, one glitch, one sleepless night when something feels off. The camera pans to the window. Outside, the streetlights flicker in unison. A figure crosses the street, blurry, then splits into two. The hum of the city returns, but not quite the same. The rain resumes, softer, slower, almost synchronized with the narrator's final words. Don't worry, they murmur, their tone shifting from menace to calm. You're safe. Probably. Just listen closely. Reality doesn't always wait for permission to change. The static builds to a faint crescendo, then cuts to silence. After a few beats, the faint click of a cassette rewinding. A breath. Then, and that's where the first story begins. It was supposed to be an ordinary drive home. Late evening, damp asphalt gleaming beneath yellow streetlights, wipers rhythmically scraping away the drizzle. Claire was exhausted. Another long day of teaching, another stack of papers waiting for her at home. She hummed softly to a radio station that kept cutting in and out of static. Nothing unusual. Not yet. The road to her apartment complex was a quiet stretch of highway that cut through the woods. Only a few houses scattered across the darkness, their windows glowing faintly like lost candles. Claire drove carefully. The rain was heavier now, and the fog creeping in from the trees made visibility thin. She squinted ahead, slowing down as the outlines of a small, run-down gas station appeared through the mist. She didn't need gas, but something tugged at her. An urge to stop, maybe just to stretch her legs or buy a coffee. The open 24 hours sign buzzed weakly in neon red. Inside, a single cashier sat half asleep behind the counter, eyes glued to his phone. Claire pulled up by pump 3 and turned off the engine. For a moment, she just sat there, listening to the steady patter of rain against the windshield. Then she saw it. Another car, identical to hers, pulling up across from her at pump 7. Same make, same model, same dent on the right fender. The driver's side door opened, and someone stepped out. The figure moved with the same posture, the same tiredness, the same scarf. Her breath caught. It wasn't just someone similar. It was her. Claire blinked, her pulse spiking. The woman across the lot looked exactly like her. Same face, same coat, same expression of confusion and fear. For a few seconds, they stared at each other across the empty gas station, rain streaming down the glass between them. The flickering lights made everything shimmer, unreal, like a film reel skipping frames. Her double lifted a hand slowly, as if testing the air, and Claire, trembling, did the same. Their movements matched perfectly. The other Claire looked terrified, mouthing something Claire couldn't hear through the glass. It looked like a warning, a silent plea. Then, all at once, the lights over pump 7 flickered and went out. The other car, the other Claire, gone. Vanished into the mist. Claire stumbled out of her car, the cold rain hitting her face like needles. "Hello?" she called out, voice shaking. The station lot was empty. No tire marks. No car engine fading into the distance. Just the hum of the flickering sign and the smell of wet concrete. The cashier glanced up lazily as she entered, dripping water onto the tiled floor. "Hey, miss, you okay?" She didn't answer right away. Her voice was distant when it came. "Did you see the other car? Just a minute ago?" The cashier frowned, checking the small monitor above him. "You mean the black Honda? You're the only one who's pulled in the last half hour." Claire turned to look at the camera feed, 4 angles of the lot. Her car was there, but pump 7 was empty. Nothing else moved. She backed away, muttering, "That's impossible." The cashier's face softened, though confusion lingered. "Long day?" he asked. She nodded absently, leaving a $5 bill on the counter before heading back to her car. Her reflection in the window looked pale, disoriented. She tried to laugh it off, whispering to herself, "I'm tired, that's all, just tired." But the moment she drove off, she noticed something strange. The highway she'd come from looked different. Like the fog had thickened unnaturally, the trees darker, older. She passed a road sign she didn't remember ever seeing. "Welcome to Edgewood." Her town was called Red Mill. Edgewood didn't exist anywhere nearby. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. "No," she muttered. "I must have taken a wrong turn." She drove faster, scanning for familiar landmarks. The radio began to distort, voices overlapping, whispers layered beneath the static. Some of the words sounded like her name. Then, faintly, another voice, her own, repeating from the static, "Don't go home." Her breath came out shallow. She shut the radio off and pressed harder on the gas. By the time she reached her apartment complex, the rain had stopped. The parking lot glistened under the streetlights, perfectly still. Everything looked right, almost. Her car key trembled in her hand as she approached her door. She pushed it into the lock, but it didn't fit. She tried again, twisting harder. Nothing. Her heart pounded as she looked through the small gap in the curtain by her window. Inside, she could see movement. Someone walking through her living room. The lights were on. Her cat was curled on the sofa. The person turned slightly, and she froze. It was her. The woman inside the apartment wore her clothes, moved with her gestures, even hummed softly. The same tune she always hummed when grading papers. Claire stepped back, shaking, whispering to herself, "This isn't real. This isn't real." She turned and ran to her car, fumbling to start the engine, hands slick with sweat. The ignition clicked uselessly, over and over. In the window's reflection, her double inside the apartment turned toward the sound. Their eyes met for a single heartbeat, and the lights inside went out. Silence swallowed the night. Then her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Hands trembling, she answered. Her own voice, whispering. "You weren't supposed to see me." The line went dead. Claire sat frozen in her car, the fog pressing in tight around her. The gas station, the road, the town, it all felt wrong now. Like the world had slightly tilted, and she had slipped into the wrong version of it. She didn't go home that night, or the next. And somewhere, in another version of her apartment, another Claire probably slept soundly, dreaming about a life that didn't belong to her. Maybe, the narrator murmurs in the darkness, she walked into the wrong version of home. The sound fades into a soft, looping hum. A familiar radio static returning, like the world trying to reset itself. The rain begins again, slow and rhythmic, leading the listener quietly toward the next story. The night shift at the steel plant was always the same, long, quiet, and lonely. The building slept around him like a giant metal beast, breathing only through the hum of generators and the occasional drip of condensation from the ceiling. Dan had worked as the night security guard for nearly 7 years. Nothing surprised him anymore. Nothing scared him either. At least, not until the nighttime itself decided to go missing. It was just after 2 a.m. when Dan poured himself another cup of stale coffee from the break room pot. The air smelled of oil, dust, and faint electricity. He walked his usual patrol route through the main hall, past the welding bays, down to the security office with its row of flickering monitors. Routine. Repetition. The only sounds were his boots echoing across the concrete and the low whir of distant machinery. Then, in a blink, everything shifted. The lights dimmed for half a second, not unusual. But when they came back, his coffee was cold. The monitor clock now read 3:13 a.m. Dan frowned, blinking. He looked at his wristwatch. It matched the monitor. An hour had vanished. No memory, no noise, nothing. Just a gap, clean and empty like the world had pressed skip. He rubbed his face, muttering, "Guess I dozed off." But something in his gut said otherwise. He never slept on shift. Not once. He rewound the security footage, the grainy black and white screens flickering as the tape rolled backward. His recorded self appeared, walking through the halls exactly as he remembered, flashlight swinging, clipboard in hand. But when the timestamp hit 2 a.m., his body kept moving normally while the clock on the screen jumped straight to 3 a.m. The missing hour wasn't recorded. It didn't exist. Dan leaned closer to the monitor, squinting. Then he noticed something that made his skin tighten. In one of the frames, his reflection in the glass door wasn't moving with him. The man in the reflection was a split second behind, and then suddenly not behind at all. He was staring straight into the camera, motionless. Dan froze, heart pounding. "What the hell?" he whispered. He scrubbed through the footage again and again. The reflection blinked once, slow, deliberate, while his on-screen self kept walking, unaware. The office felt colder now. The overhead bulb flickered once, casting his shadow in sharp, broken fragments on the wall. Dan's hands trembled as he reached for the walkie-talkie on his belt, but it hissed with static. "Anyone awake out there?" he asked. Only silence replied. Then, faintly through the static, a whisper. His own voice. "Don't look." Dan dropped the device, the echo of his own voice still ringing in his ears. He stared at the monitors again. Every screen was showing the same angle now, the hallway camera. It shouldn't have been possible. Each camera was separate. But they were all displaying the same live feed of him standing right there in the security room, staring at the screens. His reflection on the monitors tilted its head slightly to the left. Dan didn't move. For a full 10 seconds, neither did it. Then the reflection smiled. His breath hitched, his chest tightening with panic. He turned around, flashlight beams slicing through the darkness of the hall. Empty. Only the hum of lights and the faint metallic echo of dripping water. When he turned back, every monitor showed static except one. Camera 9. The feed was still running, showing him asleep in his chair. Head tilted back, mouth slightly open, breathing slow. But he wasn't asleep now. He was standing, watching himself. He felt dizzy, like the air around him had changed weight. This has to be old footage, he muttered. But the timestamp at the bottom corner read 3:24 a.m. The current time. Live. Dan watched as the sleeping version of himself began to stir. The man on the monitor blinked, rubbed his eyes, and then, slowly, turned his head to look directly into the camera lens. Straight at him. Dan stumbled backward, knocking his chair over. No, no, no. His words broke into short gasps. The man on the screen stood up, his movements jerky, unnatural, like a puppet remembering how to walk. He reached for the screen, hand trembling, and the monitor's image warped, like water rippling under a touch. His own face looked distorted, stretching into a grin that didn't belong to him. The lights went out. Only the glow of the monitors remained, flickering pale blue in the darkness. On every screen now, the other version of him stood closer, walking toward the lens one step at a time. Dan backed into the door, fumbling for the handle. It wouldn't budge. His pulse roared in his ears. The lights from the monitors flashed brighter for an instant, and he saw movement reflected in the glass panel of the door. A figure standing just behind him. The smell of ozone filled the air. A low hum, almost mechanical, reverberated through the room. The monitors began to glitch, lines tearing through the image like someone rewriting the moment in real time. He spun around, flashlight beam cutting through empty space. No one there. The hum stopped. Silence swallowed the building again. Then, slowly, every monitor blinked back to life. All feeds normal. The timestamp now read 4 a.m. Dan stood frozen, barely breathing. His reflection in the black glass of the monitors stared back. Normal now. Expressionless. For a moment, he almost convinced himself it was all in his head. He reached for his coffee cup again. Still cold. On the desk, beside the cup, the tape recorder's red light was blinking. He hadn't touched it all night. The recording had restarted itself. He pressed play. From the speakers came a faint, static-filled version of his own voice. You shouldn't have watched it. The tape clicked off. The rain outside began again, softly tapping against the steel roof. The camera panned slowly across the empty security room, the chair upright once more, the monitors looping through the same hallway footage on repeat. On one of the screens, just for a moment, two Dawns sat sleeping side by side. Then the footage glitched, and only one remained. The static hum deepens, blending into the next story's opening beat. The attic smelled of dust and old paper. The air was thick, still, and heavy with the scent of time. Anna sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, surrounded by boxes labeled in faded black marker. Family stuff, old photos, memories. She'd come up here looking for a single picture of her parents to frame for the hallway, but what she found was something that made her skin crawl in a way she couldn't explain. The first photograph looked harmless enough, her family at a picnic maybe 20 years ago. Her mother's smile was bright, her father's arm around her shoulder, and little Anna, 5 years old then, sitting cross-legged on a blanket with a juice box. But there was someone else in the photo. A boy. He stood in the background, near the trees. Pale, unsmiling, dressed in old-fashioned clothes that didn't fit the rest of the picture. She squinted, thinking maybe it was a stranger in the park. But something about his face, something felt wrong. His eyes looked directly into the camera. Straight into her. She flipped through the stack, the faint sound of old paper scratching against wood. Another photo, her 6th birthday, candles glowing, friends laughing around the table. And there he was again. Same boy, same expression. A little closer this time. Her pulse quickened. She pulled more photos from the box, Christmas mornings, school recitals, family barbecues. Every time she found him somewhere in the frame, sometimes in the background, sometimes standing just behind her shoulder. And in every single picture, his face was frozen in the same blank, almost knowing stare. Anna sat back against a beam, her breath coming faster. Her mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe a family friend, a cousin she didn't remember, a camera trick, anything. But deep down, her body knew what her mind wouldn't accept. The boy wasn't supposed to be there. The light bulb above her flickered once, humming softly. Shadows shifted across the attic, stretching long and thin. Anna picked up one photo and held it under the light. The boy's face was slightly blurred, but the outline of his eyes was sharp, disturbingly so. They seemed to shimmer, almost reflecting the dim bulb above her. She shivered, whispering to herself, "No way! This can't be real." Her phone buzzed suddenly, startling her. The sound echoed in the hollow attic space. It was her mom calling. She answered quickly, forcing her voice to sound casual. "Hey, Mom. Weird question. Do you remember anyone named?" She stopped, realizing she didn't have a name to ask about. "Never mind, actually. Just, in our old pictures there's this kid. A boy I don't recognize." There was a pause on the other end, a soft intake of breath. Then her mother's voice, quiet, uneasy. "You found the photos, didn't you?" Anna froze. "What do you mean?" "Sweetheart, listen to me carefully," her mother said, her tone suddenly firm. "Don't look at any more of them. Just put the box away." Anna frowned. "Why? Who is he?" Her mother hesitated, voice trembling slightly. "When you were little, you used to talk about a boy. You said he came to play with you when we weren't home. You called him the quiet one. I thought it was an imaginary friend. But then—" She trailed off, her words dissolving into silence. Anna's voice cracked. "Then what?" Her mother whispered. "We had the photos developed from your birthday that year. He was in them, just standing there. Every single one." Anna stared down at the pile spread around her. Dozens of photos, dozens of appearances. Her throat went dry. "Mom, what did you do with the pictures?" "I burned them," her mother said flatly. "Every last one. We moved after that. I didn't want you remembering him." Anna swallowed hard, her hands trembling. "But then why are they still here?" The line went dead. Her phone screen glowed faintly in the attic darkness. She checked the time. 2:37 a.m. The air felt heavier now, colder. She gathered the photos with shaking hands, planning to throw them back in the box. But one slipped from her grip and fluttered face down to the floor. She turned it over. It was a picture she hadn't seen before. One that froze her completely. It wasn't a family photo. It was just her. Older. Taken recently, judging by her clothes. She was sitting at her kitchen table, reading her phone. And behind her, in the corner of the frame, the boy stood. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't possible. She hadn't taken any new photos lately, especially not ones from that angle. Her breath came out in shallow bursts as she looked closer. The boy was smiling now. Just slightly. His eyes glinted like wet glass. The light bulb above her buzzed louder, the shadows in the attic seeming to pulse. Anna's hands shook violently. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." The bulb popped with a sharp crack, plunging the attic into total darkness. The silence afterward felt alive. Her phone screen still glowed faintly beside her. She reached for it, her hands cold and clumsy. She turned the camera on, using the faint light to scan the attic around her. Dust floated in the beam. Old boxes. Empty air. Nothing. She turned the phone toward the stack of photos again. Her heart stopped. The boy wasn't in the pictures anymore. Every image was empty, just her family, just the background. Except for one photo, the one from her kitchen. The boy was gone. And so was she. Her reflection in the phone's black screen flickered for a split second, but her mouth wasn't moving the way it should. Her reflection smiled first. She dropped the phone. The attic creaked softly, with stretching under invisible weight. Somewhere in the darkness, a child's whisper echoed, faint, familiar, close to her ear. Tag, you're it. The camera would linger on the fallen photograph, the boy now standing alone, where Anna once sat. The faint sound of a shutter click repeats, echoing into silence. Then the static begins to build again, a low, humming pulse, slowly fading into the next story's quiet, rhythmic breath. The rain fell in steady sheets, drumming against the windshield as Daniel squinted through the blur of headlights and water. It was just past midnight, and he was on his last delivery run of the night. The air smelled of wet asphalt and gasoline, the city streets nearly deserted. He loved nights like this, quiet, eerie, almost peaceful. Until tonight, he pulled the van over to the curb in front of a narrow, unmarked building. The address matched the order, 1137 Hollow Street, but the place didn't look like any restaurant, home, or office. The windows were boarded up, and the door was cracked slightly open. A single light glowed faintly inside, flickering like a dying bulb. Daniel checked the delivery slip again. One small package, prepaid, no contact required. Just leave it at the door. Easy money. He grabbed the box, feeling the strange weight of it in his hands. It wasn't heavy, but it shifted oddly, like something inside was sliding against the cardboard. He hesitated, listening. No sound, no movement, just rain and the distant hum of traffic. He stepped out into the storm, hoodie pulled tight against the wind. The street was empty except for the faint glow of a street lamp flickering overhead. As he approached the doorway, he noticed something unsettling. Muddy footprints leading out of the building. Not in. Bare feet. Small ones. Daniel swallowed, crouched, and set the box on the step. The instructions said not to knock, but curiosity got the better of him. He tapped lightly on the door anyway. The hollow sound echoed down the street. Nothing. He turned to leave, but the door creaked open wider behind him. Hello? He called out, his voice low. Delivery for whoever lives here? No answer. Just that flickering light inside, faintly illuminating the edge of a hallway. He stepped forward, half expecting someone to yell at him to leave. The inside smelled like damp wood and old metal. The walls were peeling, and the air was thick with mildew. He placed the box just past the threshold and backed away, but then from deeper inside came a soft thud. He froze. Came again, rhythmic, slow, like footsteps on old floorboards. Look, I don't want any trouble, he said nervously, his voice echoing slightly. I'm just dropping this off. The sound stopped. The flickering bulb buzzed louder, pulsing as though it was straining against something unseen. Daniel turned toward the exit, ready to leave, when a faint whisper brushed against his ear. Don't go yet. He spun around. No one was there. The hallway was empty, but something had changed. The box was gone. Daniel's breath caught. He stared at the spot where he'd just set it down. The floorboards were still wet from the rain dripping off his shoes, but the box had vanished completely. He took a cautious step back. Then another. Something moved in the shadows ahead. The shape was small, crouched low, hands pressed flat against the floor. A child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, pale skin almost glowing in the weak light. The boy lifted his head slowly, his eyes wide and hollow. Did you bring it? The boy asked softly. Daniel stumbled back, gripping the doorknob behind him. What are you talking about? Bring what? The boy tilted his head, staring at him. The box. I left it right there, Daniel stammered. You can take it, I'm leaving. The boy blinked once. It's not for me. Before Daniel could respond, the lights flickered violently. The sound of something scratching echoed from the ceiling above them. Long, dragging claws scraping against wood. Dust rained down. The boy looked up, expressionless. It's awake. A loud crack split the air as a floorboard snapped somewhere upstairs. Then another. Heavy footsteps pounded down, growing louder, closer, until Daniel could feel the vibrations through the floor. He bolted for the door, but it slammed shut in his face with a deafening bang. He yanked at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Behind him, the boy whispered, "It's coming." The sound was unbearable now, like someone dragging chains across the walls, moving in erratic bursts. The flickering light cast jerky shadows that danced across the hallway. Then, from the darkness above the staircase, Daniel saw movement. A figure impossibly tall, its limbs wrong. Too long, too thin. Its head brushed the ceiling as it crouched to fit down the stairs. The skin looked gray and stretched, eyes reflecting the bulb's dying light. The boy stepped aside, his voice calm. "It wants what's inside the box." Daniel backed against the door, his heart hammering. "Take it. Take whatever you want." The creature tilted its head, the sound of bones cracking. Then, slowly, it extended one skeletal hand toward him. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut, praying this was a nightmare. The door behind him suddenly swung open, slamming him backward into the rain. He fell hard onto the pavement, gasping. He scrambled to his feet and looked back. The doorway was empty. No boy, no light, no sound, just darkness. His van sat idling across the street. He ran to it, jumped inside, and locked the doors. His hands shook violently as he gripped the wheel. That's when he noticed the box. It was sitting on the passenger seat, dry, untouched, as if it had never left the van. Daniel stared at it, his breath fogging the glass. Then, faintly, he heard the sound again. The scratching, not from outside this time, from inside the box. He reached out with trembling hands, gripping the edges of the cardboard. His mind screamed not to open it, but curiosity or fear pushed him forward. He peeled the tape back slowly. A thick, cold air rushed out, like exhaling something that had been trapped for years. Inside, there was only a small, black envelope. No label, no name. He picked it up and tore it open. Inside was a single photograph of him sitting in his van, staring at the camera with the same terrified expression he had right now. And behind him, through the rain-covered window, stood the boy. Daniel looked up instantly, but the passenger seat was empty. Just the box quietly sitting there. He didn't wait. He slammed the gear into drive and sped off into the storm, tires screeching on the slick road. His pulse thundered in his ears as he glanced in the mirror and froze. The boy was sitting in the back seat, his reflection staring back at him, eyes hollow, lips curling into a faint, knowing smile. The apartment was small, quiet, and smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. Claire had moved in just 2 weeks ago. A new start after a long breakup, a new job, a new city. Everything felt foreign, yet the silence of this place was comforting in a way she couldn't explain. The only thing she didn't like was the mirror. It hung in the hallway across from her bedroom, an old, ornate thing with a bronze frame and tiny carved roses along the edges. The landlord said it came with the apartment, that it was antique, part of the character of the place. But Claire didn't like how it seemed to watch. She had caught her reflection moving once when she hadn't. Just a flicker, a twitch in the corner of her eye. She told herself it was exhaustion. The long hours at the design studio. Too much caffeine. Not enough sleep. But deep down something felt off. That night, rain pattered softly against the window panes, the city outside glimmering under the glow of wet streetlights. Claire sat on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders, sipping tea and scrolling aimlessly through her phone. The mirror in the hall reflected a sliver of her sitting there, a faint blur from where she sat. She turned off the TV and stood. The silence felt thick, heavier than it should have. As she passed the hallway, she saw movement in the corner of her vision, her reflection, but she hadn't moved. Claire froze. Her reflection stood a second longer than it should have before mimicking her, like a delayed video feed. She blinked, then laughed nervously. "Jesus, I'm losing it," she muttered. She rubbed her eyes and stepped closer to the mirror. The reflection looked perfect. Same eyes, same sweater, same loose bun of hair. But something about the eyes, they didn't seem to focus on her. It was like they were looking past her, into something behind her that wasn't there. She turned around, empty hallway. She turned back, and for a split second the reflection smiled. Claire stumbled backward, heart hammering. The reflection hadn't moved again, but she could have sworn she saw teeth. She left the lights on that night. The next morning, she decided she'd cover the mirror. Maybe it was all in her head, but she couldn't shake the image of that smile. She grabbed an old bedsheet and draped it over the frame. The air in the apartment felt lighter instantly, like she could finally breathe again. Days passed. She worked late, came home tired, ignored the covered mirror. Until Thursday night. She woke to a sound, a soft, dragging noise, like fabric sliding against the floor. The kind of sound that feels wrong in the middle of the night. She sat up, listening. Came again. Claire got out of bed and crept to the hallway. The light from the street outside spilled faintly through the blinds. The sheet was gone. The mirror was uncovered. Her reflection stared back at her, wide-eyed, standing in the exact same posture, except she hadn't reached the mirror yet. It was like her reflection was ahead of her. She froze. Her reflection tilted its head. She didn't. A sound escaped her throat, half gasp, half cry, as she stumbled backward. The reflection mimicked her again, perfectly this time, face blank, expressionless. Then, slowly, the image began to smudge. Like water dripping down glass, her reflection started to distort. Her face warped, eyes stretching too wide, mouth twitching at the corners, as if something behind the surface was trying to crawl out. Claire screamed and ran to the kitchen, fumbling for her phone. Her hands trembled as she dialed her friend, Lily. The line rang once, twice, then a voice answered. "Hello." Claire exhaled shakily. "Lily, something's wrong. There's something in my apartment." But the voice that answered didn't sound quite right. "Why are you calling so late?" the voice said softly. Claire froze. That wasn't Lily's tone. It was the same pitch, same sound, but slower, colder. "I need help," Claire whispered. "You're standing in front of the mirror, aren't you?" The phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the tile floor. The voice continued to speak, muffled by distance. "Don't turn around." She did. The hallway light flickered once. The mirror's surface rippled like water, and her reflection was gone. For a moment there was only blackness. Then two pale hands pressed against the inside of the glass from the other side. Claire stumbled backward, grabbing the nearest chair. She hurled it at the mirror with all her strength. The glass shattered, pieces flying across the floor like shards of light. The apartment went dark. For several seconds, nothing moved. The silence was suffocating. Claire backed into her bedroom, slamming the door shut, locking it. She sat against it, trying to steady her breathing. Then came the faint crunch of glass underfoot. Step, step, step. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, holding her breath. Something moved in the hallway. A faint reflection danced across the wall, but there was no mirror left to reflect it. A whisper slithered through the crack under the door. "You broke the wrong side." The light bulb above her flickered, humming softly. She turned slowly toward the closet mirror. The one she'd forgotten was even there. Her own face looked back at her, pale and shaking. But behind her reflection, inside the mirror's dim glow, another version of her stood in the darkness. Eyes completely black, lips curved into a slow, wide smile. The reflection raised one hand and placed it flat against the glass. Claire's hand lifted on its own, mirroring it. Her scream echoed once through the night, then silence. The next morning, the landlord found the apartment empty. The mirrors were shattered, every one except the hallway piece, which had been repaired perfectly. Inside the reflection, if you looked closely, a faint handprint lingered in the glass, pressed there from the inside. The narration fades with the soft sound of dripping water, as the camera pulls back from the mirror's surface, showing only Claire's faint outline smiling in the background. Her lips moving in perfect synchronization with the narrator's closing words. Sometimes, the reflection isn't what's copying you. Sometimes, it's waiting to take your place. The clock read 6:47 a.m. When Marcus woke up, but something immediately felt wrong. The air was too still. The light leaking through the blinds had that strange, frozen quality, like the world outside had paused mid-breath. His alarm hadn't gone off, though it was set for 6:45. 2 minutes late. Not a big deal, except it had never failed before. He swung his legs out of bed and reached for his phone. No notifications. No missed calls. No texts. He frowned. He'd set an early morning meeting reminder the night before, but it wasn't there anymore. When he checked the date, his stomach dropped. It wasn't Tuesday anymore. It was Thursday. Marcus blinked hard, heart pounding. No, that's impossible. He scrolled through his messages again, searching for something, anything, from the last 2 days. There was nothing. His last message was from Monday night. He tore the sheets off the bed, as though the missing days might be hiding underneath them. His head felt heavy, like he hadn't slept in weeks, but his body didn't ache. He wasn't hungry. He wasn't thirsty. He was just hollow. When he stepped outside, the city was alive as usual. Buses groaning, people rushing to work, distant sirens wailing somewhere. Everything looked normal, except everyone seemed to move just slightly offbeat, like the rhythm of the world was one step ahead of him. At the cafe across the street, the barista smiled when she saw him. "Morning, Marcus. Back for round 2 already?" He froze. "Round 2?" She laughed, wiping her hands on a towel. "You were here an hour ago. You said you had a big client pitch today. Everything go okay?" Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "You saw me? Today?" "Yeah. Same clothes, even." She paused. "You okay? You look pale." He muttered a shaky excuse and stumbled out the door, coffee forgotten. The streetlights buzzed faintly overhead. His reflection in the shop window looked back at him, except, for a brief second, it didn't match his movements. He blinked hard. His reflection blinked a moment later. Marcus's breath quickened. He backed away, and the reflection followed perfectly this time, smiling faintly, though his own lips hadn't moved. The glass seemed to ripple like it wasn't solid anymore. He ran. By the time he got back to his apartment, he was shaking. He checked the clock again, 7:02. He sat on the couch, clutching his phone, watching the seconds tick by. 7:03. 7:04. Everything normal. Then his vision flickered, like a camera skipping a frame. The clock now read 7:47. He'd just lost 43 minutes. Panic gripped him like ice. He stared around the apartment. The sunlight had shifted across the floor. His coffee mug was empty, though he didn't remember drinking it. The TV, which had been off, now played a news report about a subway delay, one he didn't remember hearing about before. Marcus pressed his hands to his temples. "I'm losing my mind." He opened his phone camera, recording himself. "Okay," he whispered. If I'm blacking out, I'll have proof." He started pacing, narrating every action. "It's 7:50. I'm going to the kitchen. I'm filling a glass of water." His voice trembled. I'm fine. I'm still static." The recording skipped. He blinked, and suddenly, the sun was lower in the sky. His glass was on the counter, empty again. His phone timer now read 4:12 p.m. The video on his screen had glitched, showing frames of him standing still, eyes wide, motionless, like a puppet mid-sentence. And behind him, just barely visible, something else stood in the doorway. It looked like him. Marcus dropped the phone. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He turned toward the doorway. Empty. He backed against the wall, sweat dripping down his neck. "What's happening to me?" he whispered. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. In the reflection of the dark window, his double was there again, standing perfectly still in the same room, except the reflection's lips moved slowly, soundlessly, forming words Marcus couldn't hear. He covered his ears, shaking his head. "Stop! Stop!" Then the reflection smiled. The same unsettling, deliberate smile that didn't reach the eyes. Suddenly, everything around him froze. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The distant traffic sounds vanished. Even the dust in the air hung suspended mid-motion. He took one hesitant step, His shoe didn't make a sound. The silence pressed against him like a weight. He turned toward the window again. The reflection hadn't moved. But behind that reflection, behind the glass, something shifted. There were hundreds of him, all standing in perfect rows, all staring at him through layers of invisible glass. Some with open mouths, some frozen mid-blink, some with faces slightly wrong. Marcus stumbled backward, gasping. The window's surface began to ripple, like a reflection in disturbed water. Then one of the versions of him, the one nearest the surface, pressed its hand against the glass. He could see its lips moving now. "You took my day." Marcus felt his breath hitch. "What? You skipped time," the reflection whispered, voice distorted, overlapping like echoes. "You shouldn't have." The window shattered inward, shards suspended midair. The reflection stepped through, identical except its eyes were pitch black. Marcus screamed, backing into the wall. The figure smiled, tilting its head. "Don't worry, I'll live it for you." Then black. The sound cuts out entirely. When the light fades back in, Marcus's apartment looks empty. The camera, still recording from earlier, lies on the floor, lens cracked. The feed shows Marcus sitting calmly on the couch, smiling faintly at the camera. "It's Thursday again," he says softly. "I think I'm getting used to it." Static overtakes the screen. For a split second, one frame lingers. Marcus standing behind himself, whispering something into his own ear. The image freezes. The clock on the wall behind him stuck forever at 6:47 a.m. Then the screen goes black, the faint echo of his voice drifting through the static one last time. When Alex moved into his new apartment complex, he thought he'd found a great deal. A modern building, cheap rent, close to his office. Everything looked brand new, spotless, almost too perfect. The hallways smelled faintly of fresh paint and lemon polish, and the fluorescent lights hummed overhead in mechanical rhythm. But there was something strange about the building. The elevators always skipped a floor. Every time Alex pressed 6, the panel blinked, then jumped straight to 7. The doors would open, but the button for the 6th floor would never light up, no matter how many times he pressed it. He'd asked the landlord once, half joking. "Oh, we don't use that floor," the man had said flatly, avoiding his eyes. "Maintenance. That was all." Weeks passed. Alex got used to it until one night, after staying late at work, he stumbled home around 2 a.m. Exhausted, clutching a takeout bag. The elevator's lights flickered as it ascended, buzzing faintly. He leaned against the wall, rubbing his temples. Then, for the first time, the button for 6 glowed red. He frowned. He hadn't touched it. Before he could react, the elevator jerked violently. The digital display flickered. 5, 6. The lights dimmed, and the doors creaked open. Cold air rushed in, smelling faintly of rust and mildew. The hallway beyond was dark, lined with peeling wallpaper and old carpet, unlike any other floor in the building. The lights overhead flickered dimly, some blinking in irregular intervals like a dying heartbeat. Alex hesitated, holding the door open with his arm. "Hello?" he called softly, voice echoing. No answer. He took one step forward. The air felt colder, heavier. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, but something about the silence pulled him in, like the building was holding its breath, waiting. He stepped out. The elevator doors slid shut behind him, cutting off the light. The hallway stretched endlessly in both directions. The numbers on the doors were faded, scratched away, though faint outlines of digits remained. 601, 602, 603. He walked slowly, every step echoing unnaturally long. Halfway down, he saw it. One door slightly open, a dim orange light spilling from within. The plaque on the door was cleaner than the others. Room 606. He pushed the door open. The room was empty, perfectly clean. A table in the center. A single chair. The air was cold enough to see his breath. On the table sat an old rotary phone, black and gleaming like it had just been polished. He stared at it, unsure why his stomach turned. Then the phone rang. A sharp, metallic sound that shattered the silence. Alex froze. His voice came out weakly. "Hello." The ringing stopped instantly, as if it had been waiting for him to speak. Then, after a pause, a faint click. A whisper leaked through the receiver. "Why did you come back?" Alex's pulse raced. "Who is this?" Another pause. Then the voice said, slower this time, "You were here before." He shook his head. "No, I wasn't." The voice chuckled softly, almost mockingly. "You never left." He dropped the phone, heart pounding. The sound of it clattering echoed far too loud, like the room itself had amplified it. The light flickered, shadows stretching unnaturally long across the walls. He turned for the door, but the hallway beyond wasn't there anymore. Instead, he saw himself standing in the doorway. Same clothes, same expression, only his reflection's eyes were black. Alex stumbled backward, hitting the table. The rotary phone began to spin on its own, the dial whirring rapidly. The other him tilted his head and spoke in that same whispering voice. "Welcome back to the 6th floor." The door slammed shut. The lights died completely. When they came back, the table was gone. So was the door. The room was now entirely empty. 4 walls, no exit. He banged on the walls, shouting until his voice cracked. "Help! Somebody!" No one answered. Then, faintly, he heard the elevator bell. Ding, ding, ding. The sound echoed, but not from outside. Came from inside the walls. The ringing grew louder, closer, like something was crawling just beneath the surface of the plaster. He backed into the corner, trembling. The wallpaper began to peel in long strips, revealing not drywall, but mirrors underneath. His own reflection stared back at him, hundreds of them, overlapping, endless. Each reflection began to move slightly out of sync. One smiled, another blinked, another tilted its head. They all began whispering together, overlapping into a hiss of voices. "You were here before. You never left. You never left." Alex screamed, covering his ears. The glass started to crack, spiderwebs of fractures spreading outward until the whole wall shattered, revealing a black void beyond. He stumbled backward, dizzy, falling through the space where the wall had been. The sensation lasted forever and not at all, like he was tumbling through an elevator shaft with no end. When he woke, he was lying on the carpeted hallway again. Bright fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Everything looked normal. The elevator stood open behind him, its doors waiting patiently. He stood shakily, brushing dust from his clothes. His phone said 2:01 a.m. He'd only been gone a few minutes, maybe seconds. He ran to the elevator and hit the L button over and over. The doors closed. The display blinked. 7. He exhaled in relief. But as the doors opened, his relief turned to ice. He wasn't in the lobby. He was back on the 6th floor. The hallway stretched infinitely ahead. Every door was now slightly open, each one humming softly, like a low, constant vibration. The plaque on the nearest door caught his eye. Room 606. He turned around, but the elevator was gone. The camera would linger as he stands alone in that dim corridor, surrounded by the faint hum of something alive inside the walls. Then, from one of the doors, a shadow steps forward, identical to him, smiling faintly as it whispers, "Welcome home." Lena was 21 and desperate for cash. Her college tuition had drained her savings, and the part-time cafe job barely covered her rent. One night, scrolling through Craigslist, she came across an ad that seemed perfect. Babysitter needed tonight. 7 p.m. midnight. Good pay. Cash only. Please respond ASAP. The post was simple, but the rate was generous. $200 for one night. The address was in an upscale neighborhood she recognized, so she sent a quick message. Within minutes, a reply came, "Thanks for responding so fast. My wife and I have an emergency dinner tonight. Our usual sitter canceled last minute. The job is easy, our son's already asleep. You just have to keep an eye on him. No need to interact. Bring a book if you want." Something about it seemed rushed, but not unusual. She agreed. At 6:45, Lena pulled up to a large colonial-style house on a quiet suburban street. The porch light was already on. The neighborhood was calm, the kind where every lawn was perfectly trimmed and the air smelled faintly of pine. She knocked. After a few seconds, the door creaked open just enough for a man's face to appear. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, polite but expressionless. "You must be Lena," he said. "Come in." She stepped inside. The house was dimly lit, filled with heavy furniture and the faint scent of cleaning chemicals. No photos on the walls, no clutter, sterile, almost staged. "My wife's upstairs getting ready," the man said, gesturing toward a staircase. "The baby's already asleep. His room's at the end of the hall, last door on the right. We'll be back before midnight." Lena nodded, setting her bag down on the couch. "Got it." He handed her an envelope. "Your payment in advance, just in case we're late." She thanked him, surprised by the trust. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Remember," he said, "whatever you do, don't wake him." Before she could respond, he was already ushering his wife out the door. The woman waved briefly, face hidden by a large sun hat, though it was already night. And then they were gone. Lena sat in the living room, pulling out her phone to text a friend. Babysitting gig. Easy money. But the message wouldn't send. No signal. She tried the Wi-Fi. The network was password protected. She shrugged it off and settled in with a book. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that feels too heavy, too deliberate. Occasionally, she heard faint creaks from upstairs. Probably the house settling, she told herself. At around 8:30, she decided to check on the kid. Quietly, she climbed the carpeted stairs, each step groaning under her weight. The hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with closed doors. Only one at the end was slightly ajar. A soft night light glowed inside. She peeked in. The room was small and simple. Pale blue walls, a rocking chair, and a wooden crib in the corner. A child lay inside, face turned away under a blanket. The air smelled faintly of lavender and dust. She exhaled, relieved. Everything seemed normal. She started to leave, but then noticed something odd. There were no toys, no books, no baby monitor, just the crib, and something else. The window was nailed shut from the inside. She frowned. That was strange. But maybe the parents were overprotective. She stepped closer to the crib, curiosity getting the better of her. "Hey, buddy," she whispered. "Just checking in." No movement. She hesitated, then gently pulled the blanket down to see the baby's face. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't a baby. It was a doll. A lifelike, hyper-realistic baby doll, with glassy blue eyes staring upward. Its lips were parted slightly, painted a soft pink. The craftsmanship was disturbingly perfect. Even the veins on its temples looked real. Lena stepped back, heart pounding. What the hell is this? Just then, the house phone rang downstairs. A sharp, echoing sound that made her jump. She hurried down, grabbing the receiver. "Hello." Silence. "Hello?" she repeated. Then a whisper. "Did you wake him?" Her voice caught. "Who is this?" No reply, just breathing. Then a click. She hung up quickly, every muscle tense. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She decided to call it a night. Leave the money and go. As she turned to grab her bag, she froze. The front door chain had been slid across. She hadn't locked it. Someone had. Her phone suddenly buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Don't go upstairs again." Her blood ran cold. She turned toward the staircase. The faint creaking had started again, rhythmic, slow, like footsteps. "Hello?" she called, her voice trembling. No answer. The light upstairs flickered, then went dark completely. The sound stopped. Then, from the top of the stairs, she heard it. A quiet, mechanical sound. Rocking. The chair in the baby's room. It was creaking back and forth, back and forth. Her breathing quickened. She edged toward the front door, fumbling with the chain. It wouldn't budge, like it had been sealed tight. The phone rang again. She froze, then slowly picked it up. The same whispering voice. "You woke him." Suddenly, the rocking stopped. Silence. Then faintly a soft thump, like small feet hitting the floor. Another thump. Closer this time. She dropped the phone and backed away, staring up at the dark hallway. The sound of tiny footsteps echoed down the stairs. Deliberate, uneven. When the figure came into view, Lena screamed. It was the doll. Only it wasn't plastic anymore. Its eyes blinked. Its head tilted. Its mouth twitched as it whispered, "Play with me." She stumbled backward, crashing into the couch. The doll's limbs jerked unnaturally as it crawled down the last step, neck snapping side to side. Lena sprinted for the kitchen, slamming the door behind her. She grabbed the biggest knife she could find, hands shaking. The sound of small, dragging feet came closer. Then silence again. She waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. Nothing. When she finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. The doll was gone. The front door stood wide open. She didn't think. She ran. Out of the house, down the street, not stopping until she reached the next block. When she looked back, the house was dark. No lights. No sign of movement. The next morning, she returned with the police. But where she'd gone the night before, there was nothing. No house. Just an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. And sitting in the middle of it, half buried in the dirt, was the doll. Its painted lips cracked into a faint smile. When the officer picked it up, he frowned. "There's something written on the back," he said, brushing off dust. In red marker, shaky and faint, were 3 words. "You woke him." It was nearly midnight when Daniel checked into the old Ashmore Hotel on the edge of town. He was a traveling salesman, worn out from hours of driving through rain-soaked highways. The neon sign flickered as he parked. Ashmore Hotel, vacancy. Its red glow bleeding across the wet pavement like a wound. Inside, the lobby was strangely empty. The air was heavy with the smell of old carpets and mildew. Behind the counter, a woman in her 60s gave him a tired smile. "Single room?" she asked. "Yeah, just for the night." She slid him a key. "Room 712. Top floor. Elevators to your left. Breakfasts at 7. Daniel nodded, took the key, and noticed something odd. The keychain tag read, 713. When he pointed it out, the woman frowned slightly. "Must be a mix-up," she said, though her eyes lingered on him a moment too long. "Don't worry. The 7th floor's quiet. You'll sleep fine." The elevator doors opened with a metallic groan. Inside, the lighting flickered, casting distorted reflections in the scratched metal walls. The numbers above the door climbed slowly: 3, 4, 5, 6, then 7. When the doors slid open, Daniel stepped into an empty hallway lined with faded red carpet and yellowing wallpaper. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the distant hum of the elevator descending. He passed room 709, then 710, 711. But when he reached where 712 should have been, there was a blank stretch of wall. No door, just wallpaper and a single framed photo, an old black and white picture of the same hallway he was standing in. He turned back. Maybe he'd miscounted. But when he looked again, the sequence of doors was the same. Then 713, number 712. He frowned, checking the key again. The number was clear. 712. Just then, the air shifted cold, like a sudden draft. The hallway lights dimmed, and where the blank wall had been, there was now a door. Room 712. His hand trembled as he slid the key into the lock. The door clicked open easily, as if it had been waiting. Inside, the room was dim but clean. Neatly made bed, small desk, old CRT television. The only sound was the faint drip of water from the bathroom faucet. He exhaled, setting his bag down. Maybe it was just a maintenance thing, he told himself. Maybe the room wasn't supposed to be on the list. Still, as he lay on the bed, the silence began to feel wrong. Not peaceful, oppressive. At 2:13 a.m., he woke to the sound of footsteps above him. Slow, heavy. He sat up, heart pounding. The 7th floor was the top floor. There shouldn't have been anyone above him. The footsteps stopped. Then, A faint knock came from inside the closet. He froze, staring at the wooden door across the room. The knock came again, 3 sharp raps. He whispered, "Hello." No answer. He grabbed the lamp from the nightstand, the cord dangling as he stepped closer. Slowly, he reached for the closet handle and pulled it open. Nothing. Just his reflection in a long, dusty mirror leaning against the back wall. He exhaled shakily, lowering the lamp. Then his reflection smiled. But he didn't. Every muscle in his body locked. The reflection tilted its head slightly, then began to raise its hand, even though Daniel hadn't moved. It pressed its palm flat against the glass, and Daniel saw, in the reflection, that the mirror wasn't showing the room behind him. It was showing a hallway, dim, endless, and lined with numbered doors. The reflection stepped backward, vanishing into the hallway inside the mirror, and the mirror's surface rippled, like water disturbed by wind. Daniel stumbled back, breath shallow. He turned, desperate to leave, but the door to the room was gone. In its place was more wall, the same floral wallpaper pattern looping endlessly. He ran to the window, yanking the curtains open. Outside, there was nothing but darkness. No city lights, no parking lot, just a void. He turned again and froze. The mirror now stood in the center of the room, reflecting not him but the hallway of doors. And in the distance of that reflection, something was walking toward him. It moved slowly, limbs slightly distorted, its face hidden in shadow. But its gait, its timing was identical to his. Every step it took, he felt in his bones. He backed away, whispering, "Wake up, this isn't real." The thing in the reflection smiled, his own face smiling back. Then it reached the edge of the glass. Daniel screamed as the mirror cracked down the center. A cold wind rushed through the room, blowing the curtains violently. The reflection's hand pushed through the glass, shards scattering across the carpet. He ran to the door, but now it was there again, the numbers glowing faintly red. 712. He yanked it open and stumbled into the hallway. The lights flickered violently. Every door was open now, and from each identical versions of himself stared back. Some standing, some crawling, some whispering his name. "Daniel! Daniel! Daniel!" He sprinted toward the elevator, slamming the button repeatedly. The doors opened. Inside, another hallway. No exit. He turned back, but the hall was gone. Only darkness. When the morning sun rose, the maid found an unregistered key lying in front of room 713. The door to 712 was gone. The manager insisted there was no such room. The hotel, he said, had only 6 floors. But when the maid developed the security footage, she froze. The elevator had stopped once that night, between floors 6 and 7. And the doors had opened, onto nothing but darkness.